welcome to the C-Suite Edge podcast. I'm your host, John Light. I'm also the CEO, founder of Sabretooth Recruiting, and today I've got somebody who has spent a career in the CHRO space, Jared Koesten, who has morphed or evolved, I don't know how you exactly want to say it, Jared, into this really interesting space of executive and leadership coaching for tangible results, material results in your financials. So I'm interested to hear more. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. It's interesting. You're right. I did morph from a career CHRO, which I still operate within,
Right.
but morphed really to becoming an executive and leadership coach because I realized that executives need to be guided through the ability to tie how they interact with their people to the financial results of the business. And there's been a lot of hyperbole around it and a lot of assumptions around it. But it's not something that generally CEOs and CFOs latch onto as an expense impact or as a profitability driver. So I had this moment being a CHRO where I realized that the science behind it is really psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
And when people feel safe to try and experiment without fear of negative response from their leadership, and when they feel that they're valued and they feel that they're respected and that they're doing meaningful work, their work increases, the quality, the speed, the productivity, the innovation, and that directly drives the impact on your clients, which is the bottom line of the company. So it's been a lot of fun work along my journey.
So would you define, I was going to say, how would you define the biggest problem you solve? But I think you've kind of gone there to a degree. But I guess my question is, how would you consider defining it as, and sometimes, often it's not what message an executive needs to deliver, but it's the how they're delivering it and how that interaction is then driving behavior from their subordinates or other people in the organization. And in addressing that, man, how do you go about addressing it? Because I think that's a big key to the puzzle.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's it. Communication has always been looked at as a soft skill. The corporate world really puts that as a secondary to driving through production, creating the widget, growing and innovating. But there hasn't really been a lot of education where the boots hit the trail on how to actually do that. There are lots of consultants who do it, quite honestly. But they don't make that direct tie-in to the financial metrics because really the board of directors, the ownership, the shareholders, all they care about are the financial metrics. But what they don't consider is the fact that it's the people creating the widgets who actually make that happen. And so my methodology is actually stepping back and saying, hey, executive, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. But I bet you feel that you're up against a wall with regards to this aspect of your job. So let's oversimplify it to get you the results that you need. And I believe the oversimplification is what actually makes it work. Look, at the end of the day, client deliverables and client satisfaction are what keep your financials flowing, whether it's your monthly recurring revenue, your annual recurring revenue, your project-based revenue. But the probability of that continuing rests on just a few things. What's the quality of the work?
Mm-hmm.
What's the speed of the work? And ultimately, how I feel that I'm being treated as a client, what I'm feeling from your team. Regardless of what we want to think, clients work with people who they're comfortable and happy working with,
Right.
people who they like.
Right. Right.
And so the work product can be great, but the team might not be. And so they'll take their business elsewhere. So when you consider those three pillars, we really need to focus back on, as a leader, what do I do to get my people to fill that bucket or fill those three buckets?
Yeah, and that's really, it's interesting because everybody, the pressure's on the C-suite, right? They got to make money, they've got to improve shareholder value, and so on. And I don't get the sense that the fix you're talking about is something that's necessarily going to drive results overnight. It's not, hey, we're going to look at the financials in the next 30 days or 90 days and we're going to see, bam, this great big improvement. But I'm a firm believer, and that when you have good talent, you want to keep them. And the longer they're with you and they're doing a great job, the more valuable they're going to become, over time. But keeping them there, part of that is in how we interact with them and how we treat them. And I agree with you that, sometimes, especially if you're busy, you're an executive, you got a lot of pressure, you're running this and you're running that, it's easy to overlook things you're not used to doing. Like if you're a CFO, you're a numbers person and you're very numbers oriented. How hard is it necessary to get in and have almost wear the hat of a salesperson in a sense, or a counselor to help people navigate thorny issues or sometimes even navigate personal challenges that are impacting their work.
Yeah, I mean, look, for starters, Gartner did a research survey and they estimate that employee turnover costs upwards of $12,000 per individual. That's a lot, right? Now, it depends on what type of knowledge set, what level of that person is, so on and so forth. But we're talking from their survey just loss of productivity. We're not even talking about lost opportunity or the cost of retraining somebody new or so on and so forth. I would, for lack of better terms, argue that some of these results from this area of knowledge can be seen fairly quickly. And I'll give you a great example.
Yeah.
A president that I worked with at an agency, he was a group president, had a big P&L responsibility, thought that he was giving direct feedback and direction to his team, but there's a lot of QA, a lot of suffering of lack of productivity. People were literally waiting for him to come back and say, okay, no, I want you to do it this way. And he was perplexed because he didn't know what to do. And so I worked him through a process where we talked about what he was doing and why he was doing it. And he said, look, we just have a lot of work to do. And I'm giving them direction. And my expectation is that they're going to do it, that they're going to run with it.
Right.
And I said, well, step back for a moment and put yourself in their shoes and think about what they're going through. And really, they're feeling that they're barked at. You may not agree, right? You may not agree, but they feel that they're being barked at. And so I walked through how to make them feel safe in their environment and for him to help them feel that their work was not only appreciated, but that he wanted them to take the initiative and wanted them to run with it and that he trusted them to do so. And I told him from the very beginning, it's going to be work. You're going to have to consciously think about how you are speaking with each individual on your team. Well, he did that. And a few sessions later, he said, the interesting thing, Jared, is not only did all of a sudden the rework stopped, right? There was an instant quality increase, but my clients are coming back to me saying, did something change on your team? Because we've never seen work come this quick and of this quality. And
Wow.
Reasonably speaking, that was within a month time frame. So
that's a great indicator. I mean, that's not necessarily tying a dollar amount to it, quantifying it, but I mean, if you want qualitative feedback, there it is.
Yeah.
That you're doing the right thing.
And look, I'm sure that there's
yeah, that's pretty sudden.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure that there's a direct financial impact of that was downstream from the discussion that we were having. Because if those clients are happy, they're getting the next project, right? And they probably will increase scope, maybe sign a retainer when it had just been project work. But ultimately, it does directly happen fairly quickly. So I love what I do.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's you were talking about communication. In the recruitment space as a headhunter, I spend a lot of time looking at digital footprints and resumes and talking with people, and it's really hard, I think, to understand qualitatively a person's ability to communicate from a resume. Now you can check certain things. How's their grammar? How's their syntax? How are they communicating a coherent thought in a summary or a bullet point or whatever it might be? But when you write something, you might write it in a day. You might be assisted by AI. You might write it over time, whatever it could be. But when you start talking person to person, and you no longer have time to prepare, how do you communicate when you're put in a fight or flight sort of scenario? Or how do you communicate and get something across, for example, if you're frustrated by what you perceive as, hey, you're not getting what we need to do, as a for example. And I'm curious to know, because we talk about how much work it is to do this, how do you assess and kind of understand, whether you want to say it, I guess qualitatively, one of your clients in terms of their communication skills, so that you start from where they're at, or maybe even a step prior to that? Because if you start too far downstream and that's not where they are in terms of their ability to communicate, and it's not a criticism of them by any stretch, it's just, let's acknowledge reality and recognize that we have to respect other people's perspectives in order to understand what's really going on, because it's how we perceive it. Man, I'm the best communicator ever. I don't know. I'm Superman and Gandhi and a whole bunch of other famous orators, wrapped up into one.
Yeah.
I know I'm not, and you know I'm not, and people listening know I'm not. But our egos and our perspective can get in the way. One's outsized and one's very limited. So how do you get into where the person's at, so that you can start from a place that efficiently gets them to where they need to be?
Yeah, absolutely. You started by saying, in this fight or flight scenario, and the human brain is actually intended to keep us safe. It's chemically wired back to primitive people. When they came in contact with, say, a saber-toothed tiger, it kept you safe. But now in today's modern world, that fight or flight is oftentimes not reacting to the animal that's trying to have you for lunch, but instead it's reacting to stresses at work, stresses at home, what people are seeing on social media and whatnot. So in what I do, the brain can actually be the biggest challenge that we need to overcome. I'm lucky that by the time somebody chooses that they want to work with me, they've usually overcome that ego and they're willing to step into a place of discomfort. And from my perspective, respecting the fact that they've gotten there on their own is actually the greatest tool that I use to break down that barrier that you were just talking about. Generally speaking, somebody who has an ego against what we're discussing isn't the ideal client profile for me, because they're not going to get anything out of it. They're going to fight the process. And it's very rare that you have a board member or a CEO who says you need to have coaching whether you like it or not. People who walk down this path are usually fairly ready to do it. It doesn't change the fact that we all have ego, and our brain is wired to automatically default back that way to keep us safe. And what gets through that is walking through a process of understanding their why. What's the purpose behind the discussion or the journey that we're about to embark on? What goals and outcomes do you desire from it? And then we tailor the process towards them achieving their goals, not me telling them what they should have.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, because I hear companies, to your point earlier, all the time, well, someone needs to have great communication skills or good communication skills. No one ever says they have to have cruddy communication skills. average communication skills are totally acceptable. I've never heard or seen that written, right? But I sit back and think, to your point earlier, you don't really get the full Monty on communication skills until you're talking with someone, and you can see them, because so much is communicated in tonality and cadence and hand. I use my hands like nobody's business, and I know it drives people nuts. It drives me nuts sometimes when I realize I'm waving my hands around like I'm insane, and it's just the way I've always communicated, and some people are like that. So I sit back and I hear this, and part of me wants to just kind of like high five you, because just because you've gone through career doesn't mean, and you've had all this great experience, doesn't mean that you've conscientiously set about to improve this aspect, because it's always there. And we make the assumption I'm successful, therefore I'm a good communicator, rather than if I'm a good or a great communicator and I can get people engaged in ways and empowered in ways that they weren't before, how much more successful could I be?
Yes. I've always said that the best test of whether you're a good communicator or not is to have teenage children, because they will show you that you are not a good communicator.
That's
But
probably very true.
yes, but the reality is most people, when they start their careers, are individual contributors of some form. And somewhere along the journey that they go through, now I'm conscious that I'm using my hands, the journey that they go through and the evolution of their career, they move into a people management role. Where that happens, it can be anywhere in their journey. But most often, not always, but most often, when they're converted from an individual contributor to the role of a people leader, they are not given adequate communication training, and they're left to do it on their own. Now, I've been blessed through my career. I have had one or two people that have been amazing mentors to me early on in my career that taught me what I needed to do. And now, do I always communicate well? Probably not. I don't think anybody does. But in the times of need, I know how to communicate with my team, with my people, with my superiors, my subordinates, in the way that I'm supposed to in order to get what I need accomplished. And I think one of the lapses, the big lapses that happens there, and I kind of preach about this a lot online, is businesses talk about transparency, but what they really mean is authenticity. Leaders need to be more authentic than they do transparent. Transparency is sharing information.
Mm-hmm.
Authenticity is being honest about the information. And you can overshare. There are times when we don't need to go all the way down into the trenches on the topic and discuss how much the building is costing us per square foot. We just need to know that the air conditioner broke and we need to call an air conditioning repair person. So I think leaders oftentimes confuse transparency with authenticity, and they do more harm because they get their team more worked up, when in reality, they could have just been open and honest about the challenge with the client, or the client not being 100% satisfied with the output and it needed to be reworked, and be honest about their role in that and taking responsibility for their role and being vulnerable to say, I should have provided better guidance and leadership along the journey. That's the point of authenticity that's often missed.
Yeah, no, awesome. So we could probably go on about this for a long time, because in my space, I feel like I'm part psychologist, part counselor, part salesperson, part a lot of things. Someone wants to learn more, Jared, and get in touch with you, because I think there's a lot to explore there. What's the best way for folks to find you?
Absolutely. First and foremost, my email is very easy. It's just my name, jared@jaredkoesten.com. Secondarily, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Anybody can reach out to me there. And John, I believe that you and I might be connected there as well, yes?
Oh, yeah, we are. So someone, if they can't find you, ping me, and I'll make sure the connection is made. And Jared, just thanks so much for joining me today, man. I really appreciate everything you shared.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate it as well.